Welcome to the Patron Saints of Pop Culture. I'm Miguel Covarrubias.
And I am Kathy Covarrubias. And today we're going to talk about This Is Us, Season 3.
Of course, spoilers, if you have not yet binged all of Season 3, it is all available on Hulu now, I believe. Probably be up on Netflix
probably in the next couple months.
Shortly before Season 4 airs.
Yeah.
So sorry that we're recording this a little bit late. We've been on a roller coaster of emotions since the Battle of Winterfell.
Yeah, and then we also watched Endgame too, and we were just like, we just needed a minute to feel emotions.
to gather ourselves.
Yes.
So without spoiling any of that, next week we will be talking about Endgame and a special 2-part episode because there's a lot to talk about.
Yep.
So, with that being said, spoilers for Season 3 of This Is Us. Summary and review. Let's see.
There's so many things to summarize.
Yeah, this is a weird one to summarize.
Pick as many things as you want to in a short amount of time, then I'll summarize the rest.
Okay. Let's see. I would say season kind of focused more on the pregnancy and the complications during pregnancy for, I completely forget. Kate, thank you. For Kate and Toby. And then Kate and Toby's arc were kind of background for the rest of the season. But one of the other ones that I'm going to focus on today is Kevin. Kevin goes to Vietnam and then comes back and feels the pressure for his life. You know, you can add more to the summary.
Okay, so then we also have Randall and Beth. They're having their own storyline. Randall has won his election, and so now they're trying to figure out how life is going to work with him doing that, and Beth now wanting to teach dance, and so it's been kind of a struggle for them. And I feel like we need to summarize something with Rebecca, but I don't know. She's sad a lot. I don't know what else to like.
Yeah, they're considering moving to Los Angeles.
Yes. Yep. And she's a grandma now.
Yeah, they were really...
Well, no, she was a grandma before. Yeah, I'm sorry.
They were really put in the background for... It really kind of focused on Kevin and Randall's story arcs this time around.
For the most part, yeah. Well, and Toby and Kate did have their baby prematurely, and so there's that stress with that too.
There was the complications with the pregnancy that I was referring to.
Yeah, but she did have her baby, which you didn't mention.
Yes, I did not mention that. So my review of this one, it's not as good as Season 2. I think that Season 2 was better than Season 1 in some ways. But Season 1 was really unexpected and had that going for it. I think that this one... I think it just hit too many low notes, and maybe it was just too many personal low notes for me. But for me, it was that there wasn't any relief from the low notes. There was some high notes, but it just seemed bogged down in a lot of going from bad scene to a bad scene to a bad scene.
Yeah, I can kind of see that, and. Toby in the past seasons had been there to be more of our comic relief, and he wasn't really able to be our comic relief this time around. And I think that probably is why this season was so sad and down, is because the person who we usually would rely on to kind of bring us back up wasn't able to, because he had his own stuff going on.
And even then, there are moments when Randall is that for how he interacts with Beth, and that just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So there wasn't really very much to bring the audience back up.
Yeah. So again, I would put this last in terms of season ranking so far for This Is Us.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's where I was going.
Yes. So. Yep. Don't worry, I got you. No, that's with my review.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I really wanted to focus on Kevin because I feel like Randall is too easy of a mark for me.
Oh, gee, thanks, honey. I'm talking about Randall, everybody.
Primarily because of like I've said before, I am Randall Pearson. There's a lot of things that I recognize in Randall that I myself do. Mm-hmm. And so it's I'm trying to branch out. I'm trying to do things that are, or talk about things that are not necessarily usual for me to talk about. So this time around, I'm going to be talking about Kevin, and this is something that I've been sensing for a few seasons, but I think that this season really showed Kevin for who he was, because the pressure was on Kevin to really reveal who he was.
Yeah, totally.
And I don't think he realizes who he is yet. Even though in the past season, I think this was season 2 when he went to rehab, that in season 3 he starts falling off the wagon again. I never really got that phrase. You're falling off the wagon if you're
because like you're on track,
on
like
the wagon.
Well, yeah, because when you fall off the wagon, you're not on the path anymore. Like you're like in the brushes,
Okay, that makes more sense to
yeah.
me. So, I think that Kevin really is selfish. That ultimately, when it comes down to it, when it boils down, when the pressure is on, that he ultimately makes the decision that it's best for him. Mm-hmm. And it's never really taking anything into consideration, such as what's best for his relationship, what's best for his long-term well-being, but it's more or less what's best for him here and now. And ultimately, I think that's what selfishness boils down to, is what's good for you here and now, rather than you in the future, you moving forward, you as a whole human being, rather than how you feel immediately.
Yep.
So, there was a point that he was having with Zoe in their relationship that this, I think, really ultimately showed, where he went to see his ex-wife, and she told him that he always ended up getting what he wanted. And that...
Well, not only that, but he always had a way of figuring out how to get what he wanted.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And this was a point where he and Zoe just had an argument about children, that he wanted children, she didn't. And I think this is ultimately, he ended up was like, okay, well, that's the decision then. I'm going to say that I don't want children, but I do. And I want to keep Zoe, so I'm going to do the selfish thing and try to convince her that she'll eventually want to have children.
Which, by the way, may I take over and rant a little bit here?
Yeah.
Even though I mean, obviously we have our own child, I do believe that it's about darn time that we need to recognize that not all women want to have kids. And that's absolutely okay. And I feel like it's definitely a double standard, because when a man says he doesn't want to have kids, no one gives him any pushback. They're just like, okay, he's going to be the bachelor like for the rest of his life, and good for him, and working on his career, and yada, yada, yada. But then when a woman says that she no longer wants to have, like she doesn't want to have any kids at all, it's always well, you'll change your mind, and you just haven't found the right one, and are you sure? And it's just such a double standard, and it really irritates me. End of rant.
Well, there was a scene in something that we were watching recently that characters were having a conversation about having children, and somebody who didn't want to have children said that having children was ultimately selfish, because it is passing your genes on, is the perpetuation of your genetic code. Maybe it was a book that I read. Anyway,
I was going to say, I've heard the argument before, but I don't remember hearing it recently. But I've heard the argument before.
I know what my answer to this question is, and so I just wanted to ask you the question: is having children selfish?
Oh my gosh, I think in some ways it is, in some ways it isn't. For example, he's kind of like an insurance policy almost, like when we're old.
Well, yeah.
Kind of. Well, it also it depends on if we have any more children. But as of right now, once we're old, we pretty much are just going to be relying on Peter to make sure that we're okay. And if he's up to that task, because a lot of the times that just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So in that way, yes, it is selfish because we are thinking about who's going to take care of us when we can't wipe our butts.
Hey, we wiped his butt for a while.
We did.
Still wiping his butt.
Yeah, it depends on the situation. But then in another way though, it's not selfish because raising kids is taking away a lot of your own personal freedom that I'm sure a lot of people would like to keep a hold of. Like, we can't just, up and leave for a weekend like we used to.
Oh, yeah.
Like, we used to just be able to just be like, okay, well, let's go to the next town over and spend the night in a hotel. Okay, let's go. We honestly can't do that anymore.
No.
There's just no way.
Well, and, yeah, it's a funny thing. Speaking about books that I've been reading, there was one while I was doing yard work this morning that it was a mom. Her internal monologue was that she, instead of moving from a caterpillar into a butterfly through a chrysalis, that it was the other way around. That her wings have been clipped, and now she's packing on the calories for no change that's going to happen. So, and I'm like, well, yeah. In some ways, I think parenthood is very selfless in that you tend not to think about yourself anymore. Mm-hmm. Start thinking about this little life and trying to take care of it. And in some ways, yeah, it is a little selfish. Yeah, it is a little selfish wanting to have another you around, but that's not what children are.
Yeah.
Children are their own unique individuals.
Yes. Yep, I agree.
Another way that I think Kevin showed this through, and ultimately this is my own opinion, I know this is not a general opinion that's out there, but I think through his addiction, that his own escapism, escaping from his problems, which basically are the fact that he's made bad decisions in his life because he's selfish, has led him to alcoholism. And it started from when he was a teenager, and not dealing with his dad's death, and with all of that other stuff, he's using it as a way to escape his problems, escape having to deal with anything real. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I think that in that, he showed that he really is, just a very selfish human being. Do you think that escapism is selfish? Like using those things as a way to...
I think certain things are. I was actually just listening to a podcast about coping, and escapism is definitely a coping mechanism, because that's kind of where it all started with him. Yeah. Is through having to self-medicate with his depression over losing his dad. And in a way, escapism can be selfish because you are excluding other people around you from helping you. But it definitely, I don't know where to go from here, because it's hard to say that, because there is a reason why you're going into it.
Well, and I think that, for instance, let's use Luke from the Haunting of Hill House. That his addiction was different than Kevin's addiction, whereas Kevin's addiction is more, I think he's choosing it, and Luke's was happening to him.
Yeah, and I think part two, and I might be going off a different subject here, but I think that with Rebecca and Jack kind of hiding Jack's alcoholism from the kids was a disservice to the kids.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that Kevin was able to understand what could happen with alcoholism, and he wasn't given the tools necessary to help himself, shield himself, or help himself not become an addict.
Well, and it also kept Randall from having that conversation with them about accidentally seeing the argument that he wasn't supposed to see.
Yeah.
That, that was part of it. Mm-hmm. I agree. So, ultimately then, you come to the question, does Kevin realize that he's selfish?
Yes. I think he kind of knows he is, but he hasn't officially acknowledged it. Just like how people who suffer from addiction aren't really able to acknowledge that they have the addiction until either somebody like points it out to them or they go down a really, really deep spot. So I think he knows it. I just don't think that he has verbally said it out loud like, hi, I am Kevin and I am selfish.
Well, I don't think that he really knows it. And this, I think I'm going to pull from season 2, especially when he was in rehab with that family intervention counseling session that happened that was just so weird.
Yeah.
Was that I think the counselor was more on his side in helping him to not realize that he was selfish. That it's everybody else's problem.
Yeah.
Not his.
Yeah, and that definitely didn't help the situation. I agree.
And, I really feel like that brings me to my last question, which I'll come back around to. So, but I really feel like everybody believes that they're doing the right thing, that in their own way they're doing the right thing. Even people who you don't believe are good people, I think that they're just they view the world in one way, that they believe what they're doing is good.
Well, there is a whole branch of philosophy out there that says that being selfish ultimately is the best thing to do.
Yeah.
So there are people out there who purposely are selfish because they honest to goodness believe that they should be.
Especially those who read Ayn Rand.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going with. But.
Yeah. And see, I really don't feel like that's really true. I think what it ultimately boils down to is what's good for the community rather than what's good for you as a human being.
I believe that that's the best way.
Yeah.
But there are people who do choose to be selfish.
That's true. I mean, do we all believe that we're good people, though?
Probably not. I mean, there's people out there who do like to be mean.
No, that's true. Like those people who have gone out and ruined Avengers Endgame for people.
Exactly.
And get beaten up.
Yep.
Which I don't feel too bad for them.
I know that sounds terrible.
After having spent a week avoiding spoilers, like it was bad. Mm-hmm. I knew how good it was to go in without having anything spoiled for you.
Ooh, I almost got mad at a little girl in the bathroom because right before the movie, I was doing, the pre-movie going to the restroom, and she was talking about the movie in the restroom, and then the mom was like, shh, 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 not everybody has seen it yet, honey, like trying to make her stop talking about it, and I'm like, oh no, please stop. Anyway, sorry, we got off track a little bit.
Well, and I think this is something for everybody, is that I think we all, in some way or another, believe that we are good people. And I think that's even those people who believe themselves to be trolls.
Well, at least
they
believe they are right.
Yeah.
Not necessarily that they're good people, but they believe that they are right.
That they're right.
Yes.
Well, and that's what I mean, is that they feel like it's silliness to put so much into a story like Avengers Endgame, that they're, that they want to reveal the absurdity of it. Mm-hmm. And so in their way, they think they're right, they're good, they're doing the good thing in revealing the absurdity. And no, it's not absurd, because we all garner things from stories. That's the way our society is. It's so readily available for us. Mm-hmm. And especially in this is part of that idea in This Is Us, that we really reveal who we are under pressure. That human beings reveal who they are under pressure. Mm-hmm. So this brings me to my last question then. And really I wanted to ask, how do you change a selfish person? And you can't. You can't change people. People, don't change from other people. They change on their own. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, that's what I wanted to ask, is how does one change oneself?
Well, step one, you have to recognize that you have a problem.
Yeah.
And then step two, I'm just trying to think. Well, when I was in high school, I was a pathological liar. Like, I seriously was. And when I was going into college, I was like, okay, I'm turning over a new leaf. I don't know any of these people. Like, I'm going to be open and honest as much as I possibly can. And that in itself was the first step to changing myself. And it was hard. Not lying. I know that sounds really weird, but it was hard at first, like not lying. And I would actually, till this day, if I say something that's not 100% true, I will say that's not true. And then I'll actually tell the correct thing. I'm sure you've heard me say that before,
yes.
But
a lot.
Yes, but it's it takes a lot of work. But ultimately, I'm the person that had to decide that I didn't want to keep up with all of the lying anymore, and I just wanted. Being honest is easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the first step, and change really comes through a lot of different methods. Mm-hmm. But I think ultimately you have to recognize it in yourself, and that's why we do the podcast, is because I believe that in all of pop culture there is that mirror. Mm-hmm. It's the soul mirror. It really reveals oneself to oneself.
Which is kind of funny because this next part here, especially in one character in this scenario, I definitely saw myself more in than the other. So we're going to talk about the trouble in the marriage. And, of course, we were talking about Randall and Beth, because that was another one of the major plot storylines throughout the season. I don't know about you, but whenever they came in the scene, especially near the end of the season, it was tense. It was almost like watching your parents argue, and you're just like, Mom and Dad, stop.
We love you guys. Why? Why?
Please stop arguing.
We know you love each other. You both have done some really stupid things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But it was, oh gosh, it was tense. It was super tense. And I think everybody who watched this series definitely has an opinion about this. So who do you believe is at fault for the whole debacle?
Well, like I just said, they both have done some stupid things, but I think it's a hard one to answer, but I really feel like Randall is more at fault, only because, I was recognizing some things in myself that, I was at fault for in my past, mm-hmm. that I didn't recognize before. So yeah, that's what I'm going to stick with.
Okay.
That Randall was more at fault.
Well, I definitely think that both of them were had their own faults.
Yeah.
In this, again, it all boils down to communication, right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems here is that they haven't recognized or haven't put into practice that marriage should have ebbs and flows in it, meaning that at certain points in time, you're going to have points in the marriage where you're more focused on helping one partner, and then in other points of the marriage, you're going to have to focus on the other partner. Mm-hmm. And throughout their marriage, and their relationship actually so far, it's been mostly focused on Randall. And Beth hasn't had much in terms of getting her way or getting much of the spotlight. And so she feels a little I don't know what the word would be. Help me out. She feels a little...
well, she feels a little left out.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
She feels like it's that ultimately that Randall is being selfish, mm-hmm. and in pursuing his own dreams, that he wants her to support him, that, he's wanting his thing. And she feels like, well, shouldn't there be both of us?
Yeah. Well, and there, she was bringing up the point to where we both need to be happy with our careers, with ourselves. And they definitely both need to work. They found that out. They both need to work. That's just something that they have to do in order to make their family function, which we're in the same scenario. Like both of us have to work in order to make our family function. And, you know, you're right. Randall did have his turn. You know, Beth is right. Randall did have his turn for a lot of things. And Beth wants a turn.
Yeah.
You know, it's her turn to try to live out her dream, which I totally understand. And if you guys don't figure it out now, like I definitely see myself more in Beth than in Randall. For the don't laugh at me.
No, I'm not laughing. Why would you see yourself in Randall? Because I see myself in Randall.
Oh, good point. Good point. So through a lot of our like early marriage, it was like your career was definitely more at focus than mine, which we can both agree to. And
no, this is exactly why I feel like Randall was at fault, was because I'm like, it's the same argument that we've had.
Yep. And it definitely, like, I'm a career-driven type of a person. And so the fact that I had to sit on the sidelines for so long, like, really, like, ate at me.
I know.
Yeah. And so I totally get it. But with that being said, both sides still were being short-sighted at first. You know, It was definitely like Randall wants his way, Beth wants her way, and like they weren't willing to. Neither of them were willing to budge.
Short-sighted. That's what I was looking for earlier. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's and short-sightedness is ultimately selfish, I think. Mm-hmm. To go back to my point, which I was...
Yeah, I can kind of see that. Also, it could also be a little bit of being naive as well.
A little naivete.
Sure. And I do think that all of this could have been handled if they might have gone to marriage counseling, or sought some help, before it kind of got to the explosion part. But unfortunately, marriage counseling is seen as a failure, as there's very much a stigma associated with it. Unlike individual counseling now, there's a little bit more of a... It's not as looked down upon as it used to be.
Yeah.
I think what's helping is that there's more people who are willing to say that they're in counseling. There's a lot more... your work a lot of the times now has options for counseling, which before it didn't. So it's not seen.
I think a lot of celebrities who are not seen as, or not in careers that people believe are very emotionally taxing, mm-hmm. are going to therapists, and it's like, oh, okay, that person's going to therapy, then it's okay for me to go to therapy.
Exactly. Yep.
So,
but marriage counseling, that's still kind of looked down on. In fact, I think it was Pink, I think, recently opened up and said that her and her husband have been going to marriage counseling, and for a long time.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how they make their marriage work. And man, those comments were bad. Like, people were definitely looking down on her, like saying, well, if you're having to go to marriage counseling so much, obviously you guys shouldn't be married, and that kind of stuff. And gosh, I mean, why do you think that marriage counseling is looked at like a failure still?
I think because people don't understand it. They don't understand that, it's not ultimately there for people to hurt each other. Mm-hmm. It's there to help them communicate. Mm-hmm. There's such a stigma around it because I think so many people see the media depictions of it that, people only go when it's going to end badly. But that's just a story method. Mm-hmm. That's just a way that people begin as an inciting incident for them. Because it's not a good story if they go to marriage counseling and things get better. Well, of course, that's how the world should work. The story happens when you make an action and the world reacts in a way that's unexpected. Mm-hmm. And it should be expected that marriage counseling works because it does. or couples therapy works. It helps you to discover how to communicate with each other.
Yep. And in fact, we have seen a marriage counselor. We're not seeing a counselor right now, but we have in the past. And I definitely think that it was great.
Oh no, it was very helpful to help us to realize how to communicate with each other, because in every relationship, and whether it be with you and a spouse or you and a loved one, that you grow. Like, people grow up, they change, they ultimately become different people over time, and you sometimes you'll grow together, sometimes you'll grow apart, and sometimes you need help communicating how you've grown, how you've changed because of blocks in the way. And it's always helpful to have a mediator, to have somebody there to really to help you remove those blocks.
Yeah. And we're not naive. Like, we know that marriage counseling isn't going to benefit everybody.
Yeah.
But that actually is something that a good marriage counselor brings up at the beginning. Like I'm not here to point fingers at anybody.
Yeah.
I'm not here to save your marriage. Like, you guys, the way for this to work is that both of you have to want to be here. Both of you need to want to have a good outcome and want to work on your relationship. And I think that's, well, moving on here, what advice would you give to couples who might be struggling and might want to seek marriage counseling? That's probably going to be my first advice, is that both of you have to want to work on it.
Yeah.
And be in it 100%.
Yeah, and that's the thing with therapy, is that neither one of you are going to fully want to be there 100% of the time. That's not the way that it's going to be, and that's the same with the marriage. Is that not 100% of the time are you going to want to be there, but you gotta in a clear mind want to work on it, to work on making sure that things are okay, that things that it's worth your time to put into this. And it's with any relationship, with friendships even. What does this person add to my life? Are they adding something good to my life? If not, what am I adding to their life? If it's just one-sided, then why are you there?
Yeah. And so what other advice would you give, since I gave my advice?
I would definitely say emotions fade. That really you need to make decisions on a clear head. That sometimes you need to take a walk. Sometimes if you're really heated about something, sometimes you need to take a walk. In this instance, I think Randall spent the entire time driving home, probably building himself up. His emotions were heightened. Beth's emotions were heightened. That was not the best time for them to talk.
Yeah, exactly.
That he needed to take a walk. She needed to take a walk. Both of them needed to take a walk. And they didn't. They eventually did. And it took Deja, taking Randall to a different place. And doing a Randall on him.
Well, sometimes you need to have that person, Well,
she acted as a marriage counselor there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she was like, "Look, dude, this is what I've noticed. You're on bad footing. You've won the lottery twice. You can't win it again." So.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think that Beth and Randall, even though they were very up and down this season, I feel like they were realistic, because no marriage is perfect. And all marriages struggle. And just because things are difficult doesn't mean that they can't be worked on.
Yeah.
But I do, like I said, I do know that there's certain things that can't be worked on, and the marriage is just gonna, fall apart.
Yeah.
Which, obviously happens, and there's certain things that just can't be worked on or fixed. But primarily, that's from my experience anyway, it's usually because one partner isn't willing to acknowledge their faults and work on them.
Yeah. Is a little too selfish.
Yeah. Hey, look at that. Full circle.
Full circle. So I know this is last minute notice, and we kind of changed our schedule after we went and saw Avengers Endgame. But before we wrap up here, I wanted to let you guys know that we are going to be talking about in our 2-part special next week. It might be 3-part. Who knows? We've got a lot to say. We're also going to be talking about the MCU, and it's been 11 years that it's been going on. I think that's one of the things that made Endgame so special was that this has not been done in cinema before. It's not been done. I mean, we've had television shows that have kind of like carried you through, characters, and that's why you feel so strongly about the last episode of a sitcom or whatever, that you've grown with these characters, and this is the first time in movie history that it's an end for characters that you've seen in movies for 10, 20 years.
I mean, there's...
Not 20 years, but...
Yeah. I mean, but still, I think one of the reasons why the MCU has been such a big part of us as, a couple has been because... it's been there the whole entire time we've been together.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's been nice, going to see the movies together and being able to talk about things with each other about the movies. And I don't know. I just have to say I feel kind of lucky. I grew up, I'm the generation that grew up with Harry Potter, with Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. And I am part of the generation that also had the MCU in our formative years as well, too. And I think because of the MCU...
I was just thinking about the first Iron Man where he goes, I don't want to see this on your MySpace page.
I know, that was oh God. But I do think that the MCU has definitely brought to light some of the bad things about Hollywood and movie making. So, not only has it impacted our lives personally, but hopefully they'll be able to help on that aspect too.
Anyway, the reason why I bring this up is because we're going to be talking about the MCU and about how it's affected our lives next week. And we would love to hear from you guys, especially. How has the MCU impacted your lives? And so I wanted to bring this up before we go into our usual spiel about how to get in touch with us, so that you guys can know this is the way to do it. Please don't do it in a public setting so that you don't spoil the movie for anybody else. But what did this movie especially make you feel, or what has the MCU meant to you? And you can do that by...
we have our Facebook page, which is now the Patron Saints of Pop Culture. Yep. There's also Instagram at Patron Saints of Pop Culture. We also have a Twitter at Real Honest Faith. We can't change that for some reason. Yeah. And we have our website at thehonestfaith.com.
Yep, and that also has our email address and everything else like that. So please just send us a message through Facebook or Instagram, and let us know what the MCU has meant to you, or let us know, just talk to us.
Yeah, or just about the movie in general.
Yeah. So with all of that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.
Bye.